Welcome back. My name's Mark Nixon. Oh man, where are my elbows up crowd today? China and the US trade war erupted, and I've been telling my followers for a very long time, over and over again, we do not want to retaliate against the US because retaliatory tariffs is a tax on Canadian citizens. And a lot of people don't know this, but we can't win a trade war. Absolutely can't. 80% of our trade goes to the US and only 16% goes from the US to Canada. Think about that. Yeah, so today we're getting into this breaking story, and elbows up, fight, fight, fight means economic destruction. That's right. Let's get into it. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my reports. Let's go. Yesterday, as of midnight, Canada counter tariffs would come into effect, says Mark Carney. There'll be a 25% tariff on non-CUSMA compliant vehicles from the US and a 25% tariff on contents of CUSMA compliant vehicles that are not from Canada and Mexico. President Trump caused this trade crisis, and Canada is responding with purpose and force. Oh, geez. And now let's take a look at this. Just two of the 20 largest exporters to the United States have countered them with new tariffs of their own. One of them is China. And guess who the other genius is? Canada. Us. Yeah, that's right. So as you can see, the top three economies, EU is thinking about retaliating. I don't know if they've done it yet as of the time I made this video, but Canada and China have decided to retaliate against the United States. And let's see how that's going.
18 of this campaign. First, though, the global economy breathing a sigh of temporary relief after U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 90-day pause on his sweeping so-called reciprocal tariffs. But that doesn't include China. In fact, tariffs on China are being raised even higher, and the tariffs affecting Canada, well, those are all still in place.
You hear that, Canada? Those are all still in place. And we're going to get into why they're still in place. And this is why. Let's see what Donald Trump said. Based on the lack of respect that China has shown the world's markets, I have hereby raised the tariff charge to China by the United States of America to 125%, effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the United States and the other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Conversely, and based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the United States, including the Department of Commerce, Treasury, and the USTR, to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation, and non-monetary tariffs, and that these countries have not, and I'm saying not, at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the United States, I have authorized a 90-day pause and substantially lowered reciprocal tariffs during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now let's see the news clip.
Good, thank you. And we saw the successful negotiating strategy that President Trump implemented a week ago today. It has brought more than 75 countries forward to negotiate. It took great courage for him to stay the course until this moment. And what we have ended up with here, as I told everyone a week ago, they're in this very spot, do not retaliate and you will be rewarded. So every country in the world who wants to come and negotiate, we are willing to hear you. We're going to go down to a 10% baseline tariff for them, and China will be raised to 125 due to their insistence on escalation.
You hear that, Canada? On their insistence on escalation, they're increasing the tariffs even further. Do you see how this is economic suicide? We don't want to fight with the U.S. no matter what. And just so that people understand who's actually retaliating against the U.S., there's only two countries. It's China and Canada. Does that make any sense? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. Why are we siding with China? Check out Mexico, no retaliation. Yeah, that's right. And check out the rest of the world. But I think there is a valid reason, especially if you live in Canada. There is an election coming, and something happens every time Donald Trump opens his mouth about tariffs with Canada. Let's take a look at this news clip.
How are you? Nick, good morning. How are you?
Good, Roger. How you doing?
I can't complain. Let's talk about the overall numbers. The Liberals still leading, but the Conservatives have managed to close the gap a little.
Yeah, it's interesting, Roger. You know, in the latest CTV News Globe and Mail Nanos tracking, we have the Liberals at 43%, the Conservatives at 37%, only a 6-point margin between those two parties. The interesting thing, Roger, is that what we're seeing is that when Donald Trump is in the news and Mark Carney is responding to Donald Trump, it's like the Liberal advantage increases. We haven't, and that's what we saw last week. Now that for the last few nights, Donald Trump has not been in the news, what we're seeing is that margin, the margin which the Liberal advantage was as high as 11%, is now 6%. And, you know, that's good news for Pierre Poilievre, but it also tells us really the influence that Donald Trump has on the shape of the ballot race between the two frontrunners.
Which will make it interesting over the last few weeks of the campaign then as people try to make up their minds on who they're going to vote for.
Yeah, and you know, what's interesting is that movement in the last few days has been in Quebec from the Liberals to the Bloc, and in Ontario from the Liberals to the Conservatives. So there are different things happening in different parts of the country. Maybe the key takeaway here is that we take Donald Trump out of the equation and the playing field becomes much more level between the two frontrunners, Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney.
Okay, so it is going to be interesting, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you know, and in another survey that we released, we asked Canadians when they were going to make their final voting decisions. And I think for some people, it'd be quite interesting. About 1 out of every 5 or 20% of Canadians said that they'll make their final vote decision in the last 72 hours. This is kind of like 72 hours. It's kind of like last minute holiday shopping, I guess, right?
Well, it just shows you the dilemma many people are facing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yes, they might support one of the parties or they might like some of the leaders, but you know, if 1 out of every 5 Canadians are waiting till the very, very end, the last 72 hours to make their final vote decision, that means, you know, yes, one party might be leading today, but the reality is that it is fragile right across the board as Canadians wait to judge all of the federal parties and the federal.
Can you believe that, Canada? Literally, Donald Trump could decide this election by tweeting at 2 in the morning to say that he's going to be imposing additional tariffs and the 51st state is happening. Next day, everybody would be voting for the Liberals and Mark Carney would get a 4-year mandate, resulting in 14 straight years of having a Liberal socialist government in Canada. I'm sure that will grow great. Yeah, see, so Mark Carney wants this trade war with the U.S. because it's helping him get elected. That is the reason that he's like, yeah, orange man bad, elbows up. There is actually a solution to Donald Trump's trade war, and I've been telling people for a long time, we don't have to worry about the U.S. Let them tax their own citizens. What we need to focus on is our own country and removing the interprovincial trade. That would offset Donald Trump's tariffs overnight, and it could be done with a stroke of a pen. This is the former Bank of Canada, Pollock. Let's see what he says.
In the middle of all of this, all of a sudden this week, it became a discussion around what we do became very focused on how do we aim to insulate ourselves from the vulnerability that we're experiencing right now. And a lot of things that you've spoken about before are now all of a sudden at the forefront of what the political class and Canadians, I would argue, regular Canadians who often reach out to me are talking about. Why are we so dependent on this one place? Can we send, for example, oil and gas to other places? And how come we have so many barriers just between ourselves? Let me start on the last part. If we were to get rid of those barriers, and I don't purport to say it's a simple thing, but if we were, how much of an impact could that have?
The estimates that we have available suggest it's bigger than what I just described as the impact from the tariffs, that we would enjoy a permanent increase in our pay, everybody, by somewhere between 4 and 7%. The other way to look at it is it's as if there's a roughly 20 to 22% tariff within Canada. So it's not that different from the 25% tariff between Canada and the United States, which is what's under threat. So it's a very significant thing, and I've said for years that that's real money. It's as if it's lying on the sidewalk and everyone refuses just to bend over to pick it up. It requires that you agree that maybe you only have one standard for transport trucks across the entire country, or you just recognize one another's standards. You don't have to change everything. Just have one piece of paper. This is what if these are the qualifications to be a carpenter in Ontario. They're a little different, let's say, in Quebec, but we recognize each other's qualifications. Those are all good qualifications, and so we don't have to rewrite everything if we cross-acknowledge or cross-recognize those things. Just labor mobility alone is probably the most important one to fix, and that's probably the easiest because a stroke of a pen could do that.
So that means having...
Do you hear that? A stroke of a pen. That should have happened during the pandemic when we were short of nurses and different skilled trades. We could have done the interprovincial barriers could have been removed at that point. And we're sitting here today and we have an opportunity to do it. And it could be done with a stroke of a pen. Do you see? We are at war with ourselves. We aren't at war with the U.S. at all. We could remove the interprovincial trade barriers. It'd increase our income by 4 to 7% per person. Do you understand how large that is? He just said that's between 22 and basically 25%. The tariffs that the U.S. is imposing on us could be removed by ourselves, within ourselves. Oh, geez, you can't make any of this stuff up. And that is why when we see retaliatory tariffs against the U.S., that is just to be reelected. The Liberals to be reelected. Let's be real. Let's continue.
The ability to, be a nurse in a different province.
That's it. Yeah, not have to requalify or, if a couple, one of the member of a couple gets a job offer, somewhere, and wow, that's going to really be great. The spouse may have to requalify for their job. It may not take long, but it costs money and it takes time, and why, So, and there are lots of other things. Well, of course, the liquor and beer and all that, we know that's traditional. But I think this is the biggest irony ever in the sense that Canada was formed through Confederation after a trade threat from the United States. And actually, the U.S. abrogated its free trade agreement with the Canadian provinces. The response was to create Confederation so we would have a free trade zone, east and west, to offset our dependence on the U.S. market. Anyway, how we got here.
Full circle moment, I guess, right?
It's exactly. It's the oddest thing.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note, Mr.
Can you believe it? Do you hear that? Confederation was formed because of threats from the United States with tariffs, and now here we are today. So this next clip is going to make perfect sense to you. Mark Carney blames Canada's economic crisis on Trump's tariffs. Trump's tariffs have only been in place on and off for the past month. But guess what? The economic crisis has been unfolding since Justin Trudeau told us that the budget would balance itself.
This is exactly the type of innovation that we need to tackle the housing crisis and the economic crisis that has been brought on by President Trump's trade war. See, President Trump is in the process of trying to fundamentally restructure the U.S. economy. And in the process, he is rupturing the global economy. The immediate impact has been sharp falls and ongoing volatility in global financial markets, putting retirement savings at risk. People's livelihoods, from the auto industry in Ontario to the forestry workers here in British Columbia, those livelihoods being put in jeopardy. The U.S. is again targeting the Canadian forestry industry by more than doubling the duties charged on softwood lumber. That decision, as well as with the other Trump tariffs, is unjustified, it is unwarranted, and it's fundamentally misguided.
Let's see how the stock market's performing. It looks like Mark Carney's day went from not good to worse because the elbows up crowd saying we need a counter tariff, and now our tariffs are not getting removed because of those wonderful retaliatory tariffs. The stock market is absolutely tearing it up. The strongest day potentially in history occurred today. And here's Donald Trump's reaction to the stock market today.
What's your credibility like? Because you said that these tariffs would go into effect on Monday. You said no pause, but today there is a pause. So how can people believe your words today?
It's not a question of that. You have to have flexibility. I could say, here's a wall, and I'm going to go through that wall. I'm going to go through it no matter what, and keep going, and you can't go through the wall. Sometimes you have to be able to go under the wall, around the wall, or over the wall. These guys know that better than anybody, right? You got to go around them sometimes. You're not going to go through them. So I consider, I think in financial markets, because they change. Look how much it changed today. We went from, pretty moderate today, but over the last few days it looked pretty glum, to, I guess they say it was the biggest day in financial history. That's a pretty big change. And I think the word would be flexible. You have to be flexible, like he's.
That's the thing. Mark Carney is not very flexible. He doesn't want to go down to the U.S. and negotiate with Donald Trump. I don't know if you forgot or does everybody remember, but Mark Carney said, we talked. Donald Trump and Mark Carney talked, and they talked about saying, we're going to delay negotiations until after the election. And I wonder why, because this trade war is just so good for those polling numbers, and Canadians are buying the trap. So how is our elbows up crowd doing today? The number one, well, one of the number ones is this Roddy guy. He says, so Canada was not given the baseline 10% tariff relief that the rest of the world got. Elbows up. Oh, jeez. You can't make any of this stuff up. And here's a funny meme. Elbows up. What did he just say? I don't know. Something about being id. So it was found out that Mark Carney was getting some help in his election campaign by China. They were interfering, and they've created this WeChat and was promoting him, and he was questioned about it, and this is his response.
Why do you think that China, PRC, seems to like you? Why are they praising you?
I have absolutely no idea, and I have absolutely no idea, and I think I'll leave it at that.
Oh, busted.
Why do you think?
He has no idea. I don't know why, China. You are not going to believe the next set of information I'm about to provide you. China has hit Canada with 100% tariff on canola oil, oil cake, peas, and 25% tariff on pork and seafood. Canada is one of China's top 10 agri-food suppliers, worth an estimated $7.6 billion in goods. This is a massive deal. And yet, all of our politicians in Ottawa are not talking about China. They're staying completely silent. You would think that they would talk about China because every day we hear about Orange Man bad. But China is coming with some crippling and devastating tariffs of their own on Canada. So then we get this National Post headline saying, beware, Mark Carney's affection for authoritarian China. Former diplomat worried Carney will make us more and more beholden to the demands of Beijing. And we all know he has $250 million loan from China that he got before he became prime minister. There is so much conflict of interest with China and Mark Carney. And what's with it with the liberals in China? Who remembers Justin Trudeau and his admirations for China?
He was asked which country he most admired and referred to China.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China. Their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say, we need to go green as fast as we need to start investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility that I know Stephen Harper must dream about, of having a dictatorship that he could do everything he wanted, that I find quite interesting.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations. The police will be given more tools to restore order in places where public assemblies can constitute illegal and dangerous activities. These tools include strengthening their ability to impose fines or imprisonment.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order. Federal government institutions will have a new broad authority to share relevant information with banks and other financial service providers. We are broadening the scope of Canada's anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules so that they cover crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use. These changes cover all forms of transactions, including digital assets.
Yeah, we can't forget about everything they did, which was dictatorship levels of power that they did against Canadian citizens. Then we have Mark Carney. He loves China too. Let's take a look.
The many strengths of China is their perspective, their medium long-term perspective. This is an ambitious G20. It's an ambitious Chinese leadership. One of the many strengths of...
Yeah, they're all in with China. So the real question becomes, is the biggest threat to Canada not the United States? Is it actually, in fact, Mark Carney? Oh, boy. Oh, man. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section. Thanks for watching this report, and I'll see you on the next one.